Some motorcycles give freedom, others steal it. The Honda CX500 promises adventure, but delivers frustration, heartbreak, and debt. Stay through to the end because this isn't just about one bike. It's about protecting your time, your money, and your love of riding before it's too late. Overengineered genius, hidden costs. Honda's CX500 looked like innovation, but that innovation came at a devastating price. When it first appeared in the late 1970s, riders were stunned by its engineering. Unlike most Japanese twins of the time, the CX500 used a longitudinal V-twin engine rotated 90 degrees, paired with a shaft drive system that seemed more at home on a touring BMW than a mid-sized Honda. Its heads were twisted slightly to fit the frame, creating a quirky but effective design that stood out from the crowd. On paper, it looked like a marvel of clever engineering. The problem is that clever often means complicated. What Honda built was not a simple workhorse like its CB series, but a machine so unusual that routine service became a chore. Access to simple components required stripping away more of the bike than riders expected. That shaft drive, while smooth, added weight and reduced the easy flexibility of chain drive systems. Even oil changes could feel awkward compared to other Hondas of the era. For enthusiasts, the CX500 promised a new kind of reliability, but the reality was that the complexity became a hidden tax. Parts fit tightly, tolerances were narrow, and when things began to wear out, owners quickly discovered that Honda's innovation was really an obstacle course for mechanics. Hidden beneath that clever design was a repair so infamous riders gave it a surgical nickname: the triple bypass. Nobody warned you about. On most bikes, maintenance is a weekend project. On the CX500, it's open-heart surgery. Ask any experienced mechanic and you will hear the same phrase repeated: the triple bypass. This is not a catchy nickname for an upgrade kit. It is the grim reality of owning a CX500, and it refers to the three major operations that every engine of this type eventually requires: replacing the mechanical water pump seal, renewing the stator, and addressing the cam chain tensioner. Each of these jobs on its own would be challenging. Combined, they are a nightmare. The CX500's design forces owners to drop the entire engine from the frame to reach these components. Imagine spending hours just to pull the motor, then disassembling it further to reach the faulty part, all while hoping you can source replacements that may or may not still be in production. That is the reality riders face. The costs climb quickly. Shops often charge many hundreds of dollars for labor, which easily overshadows the value of the bike itself. Even DIY riders with patience find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer number of steps. One misaligned seal and the engine has to come apart again. The triple bypass transforms what should be regular service into a financial and emotional gauntlet. And the cruel irony: even if you endure it once, there is no guarantee you won't face another catastrophic failure next season. Which brings us to a flaw so sneaky, it feels almost unfair: the electrical nightmare hidden inside the CX500 stator. If you've ever been stranded by a so-called reliable machine, you know the frustration. Hit that like button if you felt the pain of breakdowns and drop a comment below. Share your worst repair nightmare. A silent killer, the electrical nightmare. Imagine replacing a simple alternator and being told you need to split the engine case. That is exactly what owning a CX500 feels like. In most motorcycles, an alternator or stator failure is a headache, but it is manageable. You remove a cover, swap the part, and bolt everything back together. On the CX500, the stator sits buried deep inside the back of the engine. To reach it, the entire case must be split apart. I once heard a seasoned mechanic describe it as the silent killer of the CX500. He explained how a customer came in with a charging issue that should have been a half-day fix. Instead, he had to spend days tearing down the entire motor, carefully labeling every bolt, gasket, and washer just to reach the stator. The part itself cost a fraction of the labor required. By the end, the bill looked less like motorcycle maintenance and more like automotive heart surgery. Owners often underestimate how quickly this silent killer drains both patience and wallets. Many believe their bike is running fine, until suddenly the battery refuses to hold charge. Then comes the realization that what should be a minor electrical fix will cost more than the bike is worth. Don't sink money into endless repairs. Spend it on the gear that really keeps you safe and on the road. We've prepared a list of must-have rider essentials in the description. The cam chain time bomb. That ticking sound isn't charm, it's your engine eating itself. The CX500's cam chain system is notorious among riders and mechanics alike. Honda eventually issued recalls for some models, acknowledging that the chain guides and tensioner bolts could fail prematurely. But not every bike was covered, and many on the road today still carry the original parts. When the cam chain tensioner begins to slip, the chain stretches and rattles. Ignore it, and the results are catastrophic. Unlike a leaky seal or weak stator, there is no limping home from a failed cam chain. Once it goes, the ride is over. The cruelest part is that many riders mistake the ticking for harmless noise. They ride for weeks, even months, not realizing that every mile deepens the damage. By the time they seek help, the fix is no longer a matter of replacing a bolt or guide. It is an engine rebuild, if the engine can be saved at all. Honda's reputation for reliability makes the betrayal sting even more. Riders buy a CX500 thinking they are joining the brand that built the dependable CB series. Instead, they discover a hidden time bomb, disguised as innovation, waiting to detonate without warning. Those design flaws don't stay trapped in the workshop. They explode into real lives once the wheels hit the road. First ride, first tow truck. One rider's first trip ended not in freedom, but in the back of a tow truck. He had picked up a second-hand Honda CX500, excited by its reputation as a quirky but reliable middleweight. The paint shone, the seat was worn but intact, and the seller swore the bike was solid. Yet only a few miles into his maiden ride, the bike coughed, shuddered, and died on the side of the highway. No amount of coaxing brought it back to life. By the time he called for help, his excitement had curdled into embarrassment and frustration. Stories like his are scattered across online forums. Owners share accounts of buying the CX500 on the promise of Honda reliability, only to be stranded within weeks. Electrical failures, coolant leaks, or sudden timing chain rattles turn joyrides into ordeals. Some riders describe investing in full safety checks before setting out, only to break down anyway. The bike often delivers its failures suddenly, offering no chance to prepare. For those who expected a legendary Honda to carry them faithfully, the betrayal is sharp. Instead of a partner on the road, the machine feels like a trap waiting to spring. And what makes the sting worse is that the CX500's reputation as indestructible iron was one of the strongest myths in motorcycling. That single breakdown was only the beginning of a much larger myth unraveling. The tank myth exposed, they called it bulletproof. Owners found out it was fragile armor. When Honda released the CX500, journalists praised its shaft drive and water-cooled engine as signs of modern durability. Over the years, nostalgic riders passed down stories that these bikes were built like tanks, able to handle abuse that would break other machines. But the reality experienced by many owners was far from that legend. The myth survived because some bikes did soldier on for years without issue, usually because they were pampered or rarely ridden. But others, especially those bought secondhand decades later, revealed hidden weaknesses. Timing chain failures, stator burnouts, and water pump leaks cropped up so frequently that whole online communities dedicated themselves to warning new buyers. In the end, what kept the myth alive was not consistency, but survivorship bias. Riders who had good experiences shouted proudly, while those whose bikes broke down quietly sold them off, leaving the pain buried with the next owner. This split created a peculiar divide. Some owners still swear their CX500 is flawless, while others view it as the most unreliable motorcycle they ever owned. The truth is clear. The myth of invulnerability cannot survive the weight of evidence. The collapse of the tank legend becomes undeniable when coolant starts dripping at your feet. When the water pump fails, so does your ride. Coolant on your boots isn't just a leak, it's a financial alarm bell. The CX500's water pump relies on a mechanical seal that over time almost always begins to fail. When it does, coolant drips from a small weep hole near the engine, or worse, sprays onto your legs and the ground. Riders might dismiss it at first as a minor nuisance, but ignoring it quickly leads to overheating and more severe damage. Replacing the seal is not a simple fix. On many motorcycles, a water pump can be swapped with basic tools in a few hours. On the CX500, however, it means removing the engine from the frame, tearing it down, and delicately fitting new components that are not always easy to find. Many riders who attempt the job themselves spend days in the garage, often waiting weeks for parts. If they take it to a shop, the labor alone can cost more than the purchase price of the motorcycle. The water pump seal embodies everything frustrating about this bike. It proves that the CX500's complexity is not just quirky design, it is an active liability. Even riders who conquer the pump repair discover the greater loss measured in wasted time. More time in the garage than on the road. For many, owning a CX500 means trading highways for headaches. A bike that should provide joy becomes a constant project, forcing riders to spend weekends in the garage instead of out on the open road. Owners describe half-finished rebuilds gathering dust, or rides cut short because another seal began to leak. For some, the constant breakdowns sour their entire relationship with motorcycling. The emotional toll is heavy. Instead of building memories of freedom, riders build a catalog of frustration. One rider compared the ownership experience to dating someone unreliable. You invest your heart, but they always let you down. The pain isn't just the money spent on parts and labor. It is the lost time, the ruined trips, and the steady erosion of trust in a brand once considered bulletproof. What hurts most is that riders often entered ownership with hope. The CX500's reputation as a classic drew them in, but the lived reality pushed many away from the hobby entirely. For every satisfied owner, there are others who sold their bike in pieces, vowing never to make the same mistake again. From stolen weekends to empty wallets, the punishment eventually shifts from emotional to financial. Scarcity, when OEM parts vanish. Think you can just order a replacement part? Think again. Owners of the Honda CX500 quickly learned that sourcing original parts is a battle in itself. Unlike modern motorcycles with plentiful supply chains, the CX500 exists in a limbo of dwindling stock and inconsistent aftermarket replacements. Honda no longer produces many of the key components, and what remains is either tucked away in the collections of hoarders or priced like rare art. Simple items such as gaskets, seals, or stators that should be affordable become scavenger hunts. Riders comb through obscure online forums, auction sites, and secondhand listings hoping to stumble upon the exact part they need. When they do find it, they often discover that the part is used, worn, or shipped from another continent. Even aftermarket alternatives are a gamble. Some fit poorly, others fail prematurely, leaving owners to repeat the cycle again. This scarcity transforms the CX500 into more than a motorcycle. It becomes a lesson in supply and demand. For every rider who scores a rare component, there are many more who give up, realizing the cost of ownership is not just in repairs, but in the sheer time wasted chasing parts. Finding the part is only half the battle. Installing it drains the bank account even faster. Labor costs that break budgets. Dropping an engine isn't an afternoon chore, it's a financial black hole. The CX500's design ensures that major repairs almost always require engine removal. That means the labor cost of even minor issues skyrockets. What would take a few hours on another motorcycle can balloon into days on the CX500. Professional shops know this, and they charge accordingly. A job that might cost a few $100s elsewhere suddenly crosses into four-figure territory when the engine must come out of the frame. The cost of labor often exceeds the resale value of the bike itself, leaving owners with an impossible decision: pay the bill or scrap the machine. Many choose the latter, cutting their losses rather than throwing good money after bad. For do-it-yourself riders, the challenge is equally daunting. Special tools, cramped working space, and endless disassembly make every repair feel like an ordeal. A novice may think they are saving money by avoiding the shop, only to end up with an engine in pieces and no clear path to reassembly. It is the kind of design that drains wallets whether you hire help or not. Every costly repair sets off a chain reaction that owners document like a diary of disasters. The financial and emotional betrayal. The CX500 doesn't just break parts, it breaks trust. Riders enter ownership expecting a classic Honda to deliver the same reliability as its legendary CB siblings. Instead, they face a machine that devours time, money, and hope. Unexpected expenses pile up quickly. A bike bought cheaply at first seems like a bargain, but once labor, parts, and delays are factored in, it becomes one of the most expensive mistakes a rider can make. Owners speak of the financial toll in blunt terms. Some spend more on a single repair season than they paid for the motorcycle itself. Others admit to abandoning their bikes mid-project, unwilling to sink another dollar into an endless cycle. What began as a dream of owning a piece of Honda history becomes a cautionary tale of sunk costs. But beyond the money is the emotional drain. Riders lose weekends, rides, and even confidence in the brand. The CX500 does not simply test a wallet, it tests patience, spirit, and passion. For some, the betrayal is enough to walk away from motorcycling entirely. It is a harsh lesson. Complexity masquerading as innovation can erode the very trust that built Honda's name. The betrayal doesn't just scar individual riders, it reshapes entire markets and sends warnings to the future. The lesson of overengineering. When complexity replaces reliability, riders always pay the price. The Honda CX500 is remembered as an ambitious experiment, but it also stands as a warning to manufacturers and owners alike. Honda engineered it with pride. Water cooling, a shaft drive, twisted cylinder heads, and unusual pushrod technology wrapped in futuristic styling. On paper, these features look like breakthroughs. In reality, they created a maintenance nightmare that punished owners for decades. The lesson is straightforward but often ignored. Clever engineering is not always good engineering. When design prioritizes novelty over serviceability, the end result is a product that might impress on launch day but devastates over the long run. The CX500 was not unreliable because it lacked quality materials. It was unreliable because its complexity made every small flaw exponentially harder to fix. Some engineers defend the CX500 as ahead of its time, yet history shows that a design too advanced for its own ecosystem inevitably fails. Without affordable tools, available parts, and practical maintenance paths, even brilliance becomes a burden. Riders are left paying for ambition masquerading as progress. Motorcycle history is filled with models that pushed too far and collapsed under their own weight. Yet the CX500's story remains one of the most vivid reminders that practicality must trump cleverness. If a bike cannot be maintained by real-world riders and mechanics, it cannot deliver true value no matter how futuristic it looks. While engineers drew lessons from the failure, riders built an underground economy just to survive it. The spare parts underground. For some, owning a CX500 means hoarding parts like gold. Because Honda stopped producing many critical components, a shadow economy emerged, sustained by collectors, resellers, and small shops that specialize in rare spares. Entire garages are filled with bins of used stators, water pump seals, and cam chain guides, each stored away like treasure. In online groups, the language feels closer to a trading floor than a motorcycle forum. Riders barter for scarce components, sometimes offering entire broken bikes just to secure one working alternator. Resellers know their value. A part that once cost a few dollars in the 1980s can now command hundreds, simply because of scarcity. The situation has fostered not only frustration but also camaraderie, as communities rally to help each other keep their machines running. For many owners, chasing parts becomes an obsession rather than a necessity. Entire weekends are lost scrolling through obscure auctions, negotiating with distant sellers, or driving hours to swap meets. The hunt itself becomes part of ownership, blurring the line between riding a motorcycle and curating an archaeological collection. One collector described his shelves of 165 parts as a retirement fund. He admitted he rarely rode his own bike, but he knew that every seal, bolt, and gasket he owned would only increase in value. For him, the motorcycle itself had become secondary. The real prize was the economy around it. This underground market reveals how engineering missteps ripple far beyond garages, shaping entire ecosystems of supply, demand, and desperation. That shadow market tells us something even more unsettling about where modern motorcycles are heading. The future, when bikes become too smart for their own good. If the CX500 was a warning, today's tech-heavy bikes may be the catastrophe. Modern motorcycles are packed with ride-by-wire throttles, advanced traction control, semi-active suspension, and even connectivity features that link them to smartphones or satellites. These innovations promise safety and performance, but they also echo the same mistake Honda made decades ago: complexity without considering long-term serviceability. A rider can now buy a bike that practically thinks for them, but what happens 10 years later when sensors fail and software updates stop? Unlike mechanical failures, electronic breakdowns cannot be patched together with ingenuity. They often require expensive diagnostic tools, proprietary software, and parts that may not even be available once manufacturers move on to the next generation. The cost of keeping these machines alive could easily surpass the frustration of maintaining a CX500. The parallel is striking. Honda once built a motorcycle so overcomplicated that small issues demanded massive intervention. Today, manufacturers risk repeating history with electronics and algorithms instead of shafts and seals. The question is not if owners will suffer, it is when. Which brings us back to the rider standing in front of a used CX500 today, tempted by nostalgia and price tags that look too good to be true. They need to hear one final warning. You've seen how deep the rabbit hole goes with the Honda CX500, and this is just one story. Subscribe now because the next video may expose the trap waiting in the bike you ride today. Don't miss it. Your time, money, and freedom on the road depend on it. A final warning to riders. Buying a CX500 isn't nostalgia. It's a subscription to heartbreak. The stories are consistent. Buyers drawn in by its reputation, only to be crushed by the realities of breakdowns, scarce parts, and endless expenses. The motorcycle looks like a bargain, but beneath the paint lies a machine waiting to consume time, money, and trust. Riders should remember that the best motorcycle is not the one with the most unique engineering, but the one that carries them reliably day after day. The CX500 fails that test. If the goal is freedom, adventure, and simplicity, there are countless alternatives that deliver joy without the constant threat of financial ruin. Classic Hondas like the CB series or modern mid-range twins from Yamaha and Kawasaki offer proof that a well-designed motorcycle can balance character and reliability. The CX500 is more than a flawed bike. It is a symbol of what happens when complexity trumps common sense. The lesson is clear. Do not let nostalgia blind you to reality. The ride you dream of should be a journey, not a battle. Because in the end, the smartest ride isn't the flashiest, it's the one that always carries you home. So the next time you see a Honda CX500 gleaming in the classifieds, remember, behind the shine is heartbreak waiting to happen. If this breakdown opened your eyes, smash that like button, share it with another rider, and tell me your thoughts in the comments. And don't leave without subscribing, because the next video could expose the trap hidden in the bike sitting in your own garage.